Okay, so in talking about job search strategy, what I really want you to start thinking about is what it really means to have a job search strategy. Um, Really, to me, when I think about what a job search strategy is and isn't, it's a way for you to make sure that you're not just throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. You know what I mean? So when when oftentimes, and I know I was guilty of this the first time that I left education. Notice I said the first time. Maybe we'll get into that during happy hour. I had a wild back and forth for a minute. But when I was leaving education, I was treating that really as an escape. And I think a lot of folks that we work with as clients now are doing the same thing. They don't like what they're doing now. They're stressed out, they're burned out, and they're running. And oftentimes, when you do that, you're in kind of fight or flight mode, right? And so you don't have that plan in place. And so chances are you'll take whatever the next thing is. And the problem with that is when you haven't put a lot of effort into setting a strategy and you just take the first thing that comes along, you often don't like that thing either. And so you're running from bad to bad. Having a job search strategy is all about knowing what you want. We're going to spend our first big session talking all about how to figure out what you want, right? So I want you to think about that now, but we're going to think a lot more about that coming up. And it's all about having steps to take. One thing that I will tell you guys about being here is we're going to tell you about the job search strategy that we've seen that works. There are a lot of different strategies out there, and I would recommend for you to stick with one. We like ours, but sticking with one and going with it is a really good thing to do. So let's talk about the things that you really should consider when setting your strategy. What roles are you targeting? We're going to talk a little bit about that in our clarity piece. Spoiler alert, it's probably less types of roles than you are currently targeting. The reason why we want you to think about what roles you're targeting is because as you are building out your strategy, as you are building out resumes, as you're starting to apply, if you're applying to 20 or 30 different types of jobs, it's going to be exhausting for you to get all of your resumes together. Your LinkedIn is not going to look like a unified presence. So, really thinking about what kinds of roles that you're going to apply for is going to help you a lot. The other thing that I want you to think about is what tools you're going to use to search for roles. So, obviously, I think everyone here found us from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place to search for roles. It is not the only place to search for roles. Monster, Indeed, using company websites. Just start thinking about the places where you feel most comfortable and the places where you're finding the types of roles that are there for you. We both work in the public sector, and working in government, I have to look for jobs on government websites because they're often not present on LinkedIn and things like that. So just thinking about where you're applying and what tools you're going to use. And then think about how many roles you're going to apply for in a week. There are really two main strategies out there about applying for jobs. There's the one, I call it the shotgun approach. And shotgun approach is you are going to put out as many generic resumes as you can, 100, 150, 300 resumes, hoping that you get a bite back. That is a strategy. It's a strategy that probably works, but it is exhausting. I tend to like what I call a sniper rifle approach, if we're going to call one a shotgun. And that is highly specific resumes for a highly specific job so that it's easy for you to really show I am the perfect person for this job, not I'm a good candidate for a lot of jobs. And I want to talk about a networking plan as well. So, right now, you guys are going to have an opportunity to network with a lot of folks in a similar space. Actually, it's awesome. All of you have at least some sort of education background, whether you're in education right now or not, whether it's higher ed or gen ed, but all of you are kind of in that space. So I want you guys to get to know one another, get to know us, but also start thinking about how you're going to build your network. And we'll talk a lot about that in day two. That's a place where we start talking about networking. But in that, the question that I want you to consider is, who is your target audience? And the answer to that target audience is not other job seekers often, right? Your target audience is someone who can pay you. And the way that you talk to your target audience is going to be slightly different than the way that we talk to our peers. So we can talk a lot more about that going forward. And finally, we need to have a preparation plan for interviewing. How will you prepare for interviews? Do you have a loved one you can practice with? Are you working with a coach that you can do mock interviews with? And where do you struggle in interviews? We all have a place that we struggle in interviews. Quite frankly, interviewing is not natural. It's not something that we're ever taught. A handful of us are good at it, but we are good at it out of just sheer luck because it is not something that we're taught to do. And so you'll know the things that you struggle in. Do you forget uh, everything that you've ever done and have a hard time coming up with stories? Do you stutter or get nervous? Are you like an excessive sweater? Like all these things are things that can happen, right? And they happen to all of us. Trust me. I teach interviewing. I get nervous when I interview. Um, but knowing where those struggles are is the first step for you coming up with a plan to overcome those struggles.
All right. So Michael talked about, what to consider when building your strategy. And a lot of that is things that we're going to be diving into a lot more throughout the boot camp, but just kind of to get you thinking. So what I want to walk through is really our roadmap for what we're going to be going through this weekend and what we want you to think about in terms of your transition. This is really the four-step process that we use with clients when helping them through transitions. So, a lot of times we see people thinking that their resume is the thing that's, holding them back. But really, until you're clear on what you want in your career, it's really hard to write a strong resume that speaks to that career. And so that's why we're going to talk about specifying your target first and think about what kind of role you want and how your skills align with that role. We found that folks are much more successful when you are clear in your goals and focused in your search, and that clarity can be really powerful. So that's the first piece that we want you to think about in terms of the transition. And then, secondly, is elevating your resume to align with that target. So we want your resume to be industry specific and tailored to match that target role so that you can show your transferable skills in the language of the new role. So we're going to talk later today about how you do that. And then narrating your story is about defining your personal brand and telling your career story to highlight what makes you uniquely qualified. So this is a really important piece to making a career transition because you come from a unique place and you have to tell the hiring manager or recruiter what skills that you have that others may not. So this goes into optimizing your LinkedIn profile and writing customized cover letters to really tell that story in a unique way, and we'll be diving more into that tomorrow. And then the final step that we want you to think about in terms of your transition is demonstrating your value, which is really about building confidence in terms of conveying that value, right? So we find that a lot of candidates, even though they know their skills, they struggle to convey that confidence when it comes to their interview process. It's important to know how to demonstrate that and also how to negotiate to get paid what you're worth. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're going to be going through in terms of this boot camp and kind of the steps that we're going to be talking about.